Michael Popok, Legal AF. Add another general to the growing list of Republican military leaders coming out against Donald Trump. This time, John Kelly, former Marine general, Donald Trump's second chief of staff for 18 months. So nobody was more insider than John Kelly. Remember when Donald Trump used to have a love affair with generals, as any dictator would? He was putting generals in every position he could find. Chief of staff, I need a general. Secretary of Defense, I need a general. Until these generals, from Mad Dog Mattis, the general in charge of the Defense Department, General Kelly here, chief of staff, all turned against him after watching him be a disloyal, traitorous occupant of the White House. What is John Kelly saying now? John Kelly has been subpoenaed to testify in a case involving an FBI agent, the lead FBI agent at the time, who was fired in a retaliatory measure in 2018 because he was assigned as, this is Peter Strzok, because he was assigned to the Russia collusion interference with our election investigation by then special counsel Robert Mueller, right? He had a relationship with Lisa Page, an FBI lawyer, and there were some text messages that were caught in the investigation between the two of them in which they expressed their true First Amendment feelings about Donald Trump. You know, stuff that we do every day here on the MeidasTouch network. But that was used to fire him improperly, right? Unfairly. And he has now brought suit in Washington, D.C., Peter Strzok, against the United States, against ultimately Donald Trump. And that case is being supervised by a District of Columbia federal judge, Amy Berman Jackson. Now, last week here on the MeidasTouch network and on Legal AF, we reported that the judge, Jackson, has finally ordered Donald Trump to testify in Peter Strzok's case. In an interesting twist, of course, the Department of Justice was against that because they're trying to uphold what's called the apex doctrine, that you don't take, employee number one, the president of the United States or the former president, until you get some people below him. And since Christopher Wray, the FBI director, was just about to testify in the case about new evidence, they said, well, you don't have to do Trump then. Amy Berman Jackson said, nah, last week, we're going to do Donald Trump now. He looks like, this is according to the judge, it looks like he's got some time on his hands and he's sitting for depositions and other civil matters like E. Jean Carroll, the deposition about his multi-level marketing fraud, class action fraud that's pending against him. So he can do this deposition as well as former president. That's Amy Berman Jackson. Now we have new reporting that in the course of the filings in Peter Strzok's unfair firing case by the FBI, John Kelly and everything that he told the New York Times a year ago in November of 2022 is coming back up, specifically that Donald Trump, in a conversation with John Kelly, told his then chief of staff that he wanted to use the Internal Revenue Service and the Department of Justice to go after his enemies list. Let me let that land on the table. I think I'm back in the days of, J. Edgar Hoover and Nixon, going after the enemies. I thought we got rid of that in 1973 and 1974 when Nixon was impeached and resigned and all of his henchmen, including his attorney general, went to jail. But no, it's back again. This is Donald Trump asking his chief of staff, why can't we use the Department of Justice and the IRS to go after Peter Strzok, apparently, even though that was unnamed back in November. It's now clear that that was who John F. Kelly was talking about. And Peter Strzok wants John Kelly, Marine General Kelly, to testify on his behalf, that that's what Donald Trump told him, that he was going to be investigated by the Department of Justice and the IRS because he had the temerity to oppose Donald Trump on the enemies list. And not only that, we now know from new reporting that John Kelly has notes from the conversation. Oh, I love notes. I love audio recordings. Nothing says I don't trust this conversation or the person talking to me like hitting record. And nothing says, I don't trust the other person in this conversation, like I'm going to write it all down and save my notes as a CYA, which is what Evan Corcoran, the lawyer for Donald Trump, did in Mar-a-Lago, and what John Kelly, his chief of staff, did after he had an interaction that left him unnerved with his boss about using and weaponizing the Department of Justice and the IRS to go after his enemies. At the time, reflected in the notes now turned over to former FBI agent Peter Strzok's lawyers, which will be used in the federal case and used against Donald Trump in that deposition that I told you about at the top of this hot take, right? In those notes, Kelly said that he told Donald Trump, you got an ethical problem, you got a legal problem, you got a constitutional problem from doing all that, so you shouldn't do it, and it could blow back to hurt you. In other words, you really want to use the IRS to go after people, given that you have never filed at that time, and at any time you've never filed or publicly disclosed your tax returns, the first presidential candidate in history, the first president in history, modern history, not to give his tax returns over? You want to play that game? That's Russian roulette with 4 bullets in the chamber. So that's the notes that now we have the new reporting. So people might be thinking, what's new here, Popok? What's new is Marine General Chief of Staff John F. Kelly is going to testify under oath of another series of crimes by Donald Trump. In this case, abuse of power in using the Department of Justice and the IRS to sick them and go after his enemies, in this case, Peter Strzok. And who else was going to be on that list? Hillary Clinton. We presume it would be Hillary Clinton. Anybody that got crossways with Donald Trump, he, in a petty display of megalomaniacal, out-of-control behavior, was going to go after him using our IRS, the People's IRS, the People's Department of Justice, to do his private vendetta and account settling. That's John F. Kelly's testimony. That's sworn. He's got the receipts to prove it in his documents, in his written notes. He's turned it over to former FBI agent Peter Strzok's lawsuit and their lawyers. It's being supervised by a federal judge, Amy Berman Jackson, who's been sentencing Jan 6th insurrectionists time and time again. For all we know, she could be the judge that's assigned to prosecute the prosecution of Donald Trump in the District of Columbia that may well be coming out of the grand juries that Jack Smith and his team supervise. We're not done indicting Donald Trump. The Department of Justice is not done. Mar-a-Lago is not a period, it's a comma. There's going to be other indictments federally by Jack Smith's team. They're not all going to be, I don't believe, in the Southern District of Florida either. I think you're going to see maybe one in the District of New Jersey about Bedminster hanky-panky with the National Defense Information top secret classified war documents. And you could likely see, for all the bad things that Donald Trump did while he was still in the White House, when he was on the ellipse on Jan 6th, when he was back in the White House dining room twiddling his thumbs and fiddling while the Capitol burned. Those are all crimes in the District of Columbia, so the right location for indictments related to that is going to be the District of Columbia. They're not going to file, Jack Smith, newsflash, is not going to file his next set of indictments about bad things that happened in Washington, D.C., led by Donald Trump at the center of the conspiracy in Miami. He's going to do it in D.C., and Amy Berman Jackson could well be one of the judges that the lawyers will be presenting to. Or, listen, every judge in the District of Columbia, because there's been like 2,000 arrests and processed, all of them have gotten cases, right? Whether it's Judge Mehta, who has sentenced the Jan 6th so far seditious conspiracist to the highest level of prison sentences, or Amy Berman Jackson, who has as well, and has this case with Peter Strzok in front of her, or former Chief Judge Beryl Howell, who's had a number of cases in front of her where she sentenced Jan 6 defendants, found them involved in a conspiracy, and has the Rudy Giuliani defamation case in front of her. Or the current chief judge of the D.C. Circuit Court, Jeb Boasberg, who's been hearing all of the Mike Pence crime fraud exception, secret grand jury testimony goes directly to him. He's currently supervising all things grand jury in the District of Columbia. So all of them, none of them are going to be able to, avoid Donald Trump being a defendant in their courtroom. They'd all have to recuse themselves. They're not going to. Just because they handled Jan 6 defendant sentencing and Rudy Giuliani cases doesn't mean they have to step down when it's Donald Trump assigned them by the random wheel there. We'll see what happens, but there's going to be indictments in D.C. I don't know about this week. It's coming. If you got a clock and you're trying to count these things at home, if you're playing the coup calendar at home, I think Jack Smith is going to indict before Fani Willis gets her indictments of Donald Trump and others out of Georgia the end of this month, beginning of next. She's already impaneling a new grand jury this week. She's already told the court administration personnel, the elected officials of Georgia, Fulton County, to clear the streets for the end of July, beginning of August, because she's going to be unsealing an indictment at that time. We already know from the special purpose grand jury who's in the crosshairs. To paraphrase the foreperson who took to the airwaves right after she left her work, nobody's going to be surprised by their recommendations. And nobody's going to be surprised by the indictments coming out of Fani Willis's world or Jack Smith's. But this is the latest of the newest general, Republican striped general, coming out as a sworn witness against Donald Trump. As I've said in the past hot takes, this guy, Donald Trump, has more evidence against him, more lawyers of his testifying against him, more pieces of paper, sheer weight of documents against him than any 30 or 40 defendants sitting on death row, sitting convicted in federal penitentiaries have combined. Trust the process. Trust the justice system. It doesn't move at the pace we would like, but the wheels of justice move slow, but they find exceedingly fine. And that's what we're watching in real time with Jack Smith in charge. I'm going to follow new bombshell evidence that's disclosed through the media, through our sources, every day, every hour, only on the MeidasTouch Network. Follow me, Michael Popok, on all things social media, including Threads at MS Popok. And then I co-anchor and co-founded the leading U.S. law and politics podcast out there. It's only on the MeidasTouch Network. It's called Legal AF. We sit where politically charged litigation matters live. We report them to you using our best experience. I've been a lawyer for 32 years, practicing law in the courthouses just like the ones that I talk about. So it comes from experience. If you like what I'm doing, give me a thumbs up in this hot take, and you can follow us on all things related to law and politics on the MeidasTouch Network. I'm Michael Popok, Legal AF reporting.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.